What is going on, guys? It is your boy TKD1GD here, back again with, of course, another installment of Road to Part 2, our weekly news series, or at least we try to do weekly. I'll explain that in a little bit here, but our weekly news show where we go over first party and third party news revolving around PlayStation. And so, as you can see here, obviously I am doing a solo episode, the first one I've done for this series, and it's been a little bit rough trying to line up my schedules and the Stark schedule, so we will hopefully get back to a more consistent basis where we are doing episodes together and stuff like that. And I just felt a little bit odd doing it alone, but I figured, you know what, I cannot skip 2 weeks of this series. I love doing it. I really want to talk about Last of Us Part 2 and everything, so I decided, hey, let me just roll a solo one here. And I initially wanted to do this idea with Starks because he's the one that brought it to my attention, and of course there are plenty of other iterations of this same thing that we can do during the series of Road to Part 2, and we are now going to move into covering theories. If there isn't really big to talk about Last of Us Part 2 in terms of news or any other topic that we don't want to talk about, we can fall back on the theories that people have around the community of Last of Us Part 2. And of course I will have links in the description for this theory, as well as, of course, let me just make sure this is blatantly clear here. I found this theory by Ray Habias, or Ray Habias, I believe is how you say his name. Again, the link for the document will be in the description. Shout out to him. Full kudos to him. He has great artwork here that tie back to the comics and different stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that he really has these nice documents that really go into detail and really show a bunch of different visual evidence as to what he's talking about and how his theory is all making sense. And so definitely big support to him. Link in the description, as well as if you want to find all of our other content down below in terms of our Discord, as well as our Twitter and our Anchor link to find all of our podcasts on different bigger podcast services. Be sure to go check out that link as well down below. So the first one here we're going to cover, and if you are watching this on the video version on YouTube, you will be able to see all these different things I'm reading off of. However, if you are on audio format, I apologize, you just have my voice obviously, but if you want to go search it out, go to the YouTube, go to the link in the description, and you'll be able to find the full document to this theory down in the description, as I said before. And so this theory here is called the daughter theory. And so what's saying here is that Ellie's immunity was not a coincidence, and this will likely play a huge role in part 2. And then of course this is written by Ray Habias. And so he starts here with American Dreams. We have Ellie having a conversation with Marlene in the American Dreams comic. I've actually never read those comics yet. I really want to at some point. I kind of do like a reading of them on the channel, but we'll see if that ever happens down the line. But we start off with Ellie saying, "How do you know my name?" Marlene saying, "I know more than your name." "The fuck does that mean?" is what Ellie says. Marlene replies, "That envelope I gave you," sorry, it's kind of it's kind of small. I should probably have made that bigger, but it's okay. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit here on the video version, that way I can read this a little bit better. Okay, cool. All right. "That envelope I gave you, inside is a letter from your mom. She wrote it to you before she died." That's what Marlene says. And then Ellie says, "Stop fucking with me, just stop." And Marlene says, "7 times you've tried to run away from the last school you were in. You have over a dozen counts of assault on your record. You stabbed a kid in the knee with a compass." So definitely, during Ellie's, former days, she definitely was not the nicest person in the world. So he goes on to say, "In both the game and American Dreams, Marlene makes it clear that she knows exactly who Ellie is and everything that Ellie has done, despite Ellie being 13 years old and not knowing Marlene ever existed. Marlene keeps a distance from Ellie, but has people watching and keeping tabs on her because she promised Anna she'd watch over her. Keeping a distance from Ellie keeps Ellie safer, as Marlene is leader of the Fireflies." And that was the element that was also discussed in Last of Us 1. I remember that, where especially in the letter, I think there was a letter or some sort of conversation between Anna and Marlene when Anna was alive. Of course, Anna being Ellie's mother. We have talked about that a ton here on the channel. And Anna, asked Marlene to look after her because they kind of knew, inevitably that Anna was going to pass and Anna was going to die and stuff like that. So she asked Marlene to look after Ellie, of course, Ellie being the daughter of Anna. And so it goes on to say, it is hinted throughout the comics and the game that there is something about Anna being kept from Ellie. In the comics, Marlene tells Ellie that when the time is right, she will tell Ellie about Anna. My question is, what is so important about Anna that Marlene can't already that Marlene can't tell an already aged or teenaged Ellie? Also keep in mind, this is a very important line, she gave everything to save you. And so that's what Marlene, so what they're referring to right there is this, snippet of the comic. When the time is right, I'll tell you all about her. Just know that she gave up everything to save you. And that is quite interesting. That obviously adds a lot of backstory to, what is this big thing that, Anna did, or what did she exactly give up? Or most importantly, what makes Anna so important, in terms of something that Ellie can't even know until, quote, the time is right, and in the terms of Marlene. And so very interesting stuff there, and it definitely does point, obviously, a big red flag here that there's something more to Anna's story that we might see in Last of Us Part 2. It goes on, the document goes on and says, so far, we know Marlene has been keeping a secret about Anna. Let's take a look at Anna's notes that Marlene gave to Ellie in the comics and Marlene's tapes. So these are all from Anna. These are all tapes and different notes that were gathered and that were given to Ellie in the comics, as well as a little bit. Well, yeah. It was only in the comics. We never got anything from Anna during Last of Us 1, but it was definitely in the comics. And this is also coming from Marlene's tapes. So we have, quote, I'm going to share a secret with you. I'm not a big fan of kids and I hate babies. And yet I'm staring at you and I'm just awestruck. You're not even a day old, and holding you is the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. A life that is about to get cut a little short. Marlene will look after you. There's no one in this world I trust more than her. When the time comes, she'll tell you all about me. Don't give her too much of a hard time. Try not to be as stubborn as me. I'm not gonna lie, this is a pretty messed up world. It won't be easy. The thing you always have to remember is that life is worth living. Find your purpose and fight for it. I see so much strength in you. I know you'll turn around to be the woman you're meant to be. Forever, your loving mother, Anna. And so, honestly, what I was thinking about here too is that her quote here about finding something to fight for in life, finding a purpose because life is worth living, that definitely does correlate and tie in to the notions that Joel were telling Ellie in Last of Us 1. So maybe that's why Ellie was so affected by Joel's words, perhaps because she knows those were echoed words from Anna, whether Joel knew it or not, and stuff like that. And so the document goes on and says, there are some interesting lines in this first note. First, might I point out that the note also references back to when the time comes, she'll tell you all about me. So that was from the Google Doc that I'm reading off of. But yeah, that's also a big thing as well, that she also echoes that thing of, hey, there's obviously something big. Marlene has told you. Oh, I'm sorry, my phone is going off this morning. Jesus, phone, be quiet. Anyway, back to the recording. So, we have Anna emphasizing that. No, I'm sorry. We have Marlene emphasizing, already that, hey, there was something big about your mother, Anna, and when the time is right, I will tell you. And then we also have Anna herself echoing that same testament in the letter to Ellie. And so it's very interesting that there is clearly something here that is big involving Anna that they are both intentionally hiding from Ellie. We will have to see what that is, hopefully, in the future. Last of Us Part 2, hopefully. So, the Google Doc asks, what is this referring to? I believe it's referring to the fact that Anna was a nurse who was after a cure, which led to her offspring being immune. Ooh, this is where we get into the overall thesis of the theory. And so the doc continues on with, emphasizing that Marlene's tapes are probably some of the most compelling evidence to this theory and the bold statement I just made. And so he's going to back up, or attempt to back up, the statement that, that Anna was a nurse who was after the cure, which led her offspring to be immune to the cordyceps virus in the Last of Us world. And so in recording number 2 of Marlene's tapes, Marlene is, quote, talking to Anna, and she states, quote, here's a chance to save us, all of us. This is what we were after, what you were after. The facts that Naughty Dog had Marlene repeat this line stands out a lot. She blatantly said that Anna was after this. What is this? This is a cure. Anna was after a cure. And so that is what we are kind of gathering here when, you know, I mean, honestly, I read a few of those different recordings from Marlene and everything, and it definitely does make sense here. Like Marlene talking to Anna, you know, and her saying in the constructs and the overall context of Last of Us, here's a chance to save us all of us. This is what we're after, what you were after. And so it seems like they are talking about the cure here, about saving us all. It definitely does make sense. I don't see how that could be anything else, honestly, unless it's some crazy misunderstanding and it's about, you know, something else, which doesn't make sense. It's gonna definitely be about the cure. Marlene and Anna have been keeping a secret from Ellie. Based on this evidence, it leads me to believe the secret is that Anna was after a cure, but ultimately made an immune child. This needed to be kept a secret in order to keep Ellie safe. If word got out that Ellie could be immune, all sorts of people would be after her. And so just to kind of go off that as well before we continue on, you know, it's the prospect of, okay, you know, actually, let me just continue on before I even say anything, and then we'll go, because this part's a little quick here. So allow me to quickly go back to Marlene's line from the comics. Anna gave up everything to save you. This is referring to Anna going against her own likings after having a child in the apocalypse anyways in order to get what she was after, a cure. Oh, okay, so the overall theory is kind of shifting towards a narrative where the quote that Anna gave up everything to save you, you being of course Ellie, is meaning that, you know, she had a kid to you know, be able to have a cure within her and be immune, even though she doesn't like kids. Clearly that's said many times, Anna doesn't like kids. And so while I like that, I think what's a little bit more different is that, you know, Anna gave everything for you. Maybe there's a, so here's what I'm thinking, right? Like, this is just my little TKD spin on this theory, you know what I'm saying, right? Obviously, after the world fell, there weren't, you know, I'm assuming there weren't the proper constructs to have a medicine that was to be tested by the FDA or stuff like that. You know, over here in the States, we have the FDA. They are the ones that kind of go over new and emerging different medicines, and they run tests through them and stuff like that. And it's a multi-year trial to really understand fully what they're about to put into the medicinal market. You know what I'm saying? Because they cannot just have a brand new thing and it's working pretty well at fighting this, you know, specific illness. And if they rush it, that, you know, they could find that later on throughout the course of years gone by with someone taking that medicine, maybe they inherit some other disease and it's very bad. And so obviously it takes a long time to do that, but it seems like they didn't have a lot of time, obviously, to do testing. And so maybe the whole thing about Anna giving up everything to save you, perhaps, you know, while Anna was working on this cure, maybe she was injecting herself and it was maybe affecting her a lot to the course of maybe that's why she died. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. That was just my thought. But, you know, she was definitely, you know, just doubling down on giving up everything to save Ellie. And so very interesting to see that there. So, you know, he goes on to say, so what we know so far is that Anna is a woman in the apocalypse who happens to be a nurse, hates babies, but decides to have one anyways. Turns out her child is immune, and, quote, this is what she was after. Now, is Ellie's immunity starting to seem less like a coincidence to you? Yeah, like, it, you know, the doc asked this question. I'm not just reading that to you guys. I mean, I am reading it to you, but I'm not saying that off the top of my head. Anyway, so to me, this is making sense. I like this theory. I'm liking it so far. Things are lining up. Definitely makes sense. You know what I'm saying? But we will proceed and go on. Also, might I point out what I think is Naughty Dog still referencing in Anna's notes. Anna states, quote, I know you'll turn out to be the woman you're meant to be. In the game, Marlene tells Joel, quote, we find you just in time to save her. Maybe it was meant to be. So they're So they're kind of lining up this sort of laissez-faire aspect, you know, things will happen as they should and stuff like that. Very interesting stuff there. As if Ellie was meant to be immune. She was meant to be the cure. She was meant to save everyone. This was not an accident. Interesting stuff here. I really like this theory, guys. Again, link in the description. I cannot take credit for this at all. I am just projecting it and giving my thoughts and reading it with you all because I think it's really cool. Another line from Marlene that interests me is when Marlene says, quote, "I promised her mother I would look after her. This isn't about me or even her." This all shines a light on the main point of the theory. It's not about Marlene or Ellie. It's about Anna's sacrifice and what she gave up for Ellie to make a cure. Marlene gave the go-ahead for Anna's purpose. Sadly, Ellie needed to be sacrificed. Ellie needed to be sacrificed in order to extract the cure. Whether Anna knew this would happen. Sorry, I got distracted. My bad. Sorry about that. Sadly, Ellie needed to be sacrificed in order to extract the cure. Whether Anna knew this would happen, though, that's up for you to decide. So, very interesting. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. Because that's the whole thing here. Like, this is quite interesting. So then they bring up the point that, all right, let's say, Marlene and Anna knew that if Anna were to inherit a child, that child could potentially be immune to the disease. And then they would have to, did they know that they would have to kill her to be able to extract the cure? Was Ellie's life supposed to be just an incubator for the cure? That's dark. That's some dark, because then that definitely twists all the quotes we've had previously about, this is what you were meant to be, you know what I'm saying? Anna gave up everything to save you. Like, perhaps from Anna and Marlene's perspective, Ellie is not really meaningful in the ways of being a human. She's meaningful because she houses the cure for the virus, which could be quite interesting. And that, to them, her only worth necessarily is to house the cure. That could be quite interesting. That's a dark twist. That one is kind of dark. I like it. But then we move on to a section called the sciencey side of it. So let's go over this here. All right, now we're going into the sciencey side of it here. Let's go. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into the more technical / medical side of the theory. This is an add-on to the theory outside of Marlene's dialogue. We know that scientists in the university were after a cure and had some breakthroughs in the past, like with monkeys, but I want to point out something interesting which also backs up the main theory. Based on what we know, the scientists in the university had been dead for approximately 10 years. We know this because of the bloaters that are in the university, which take about 10 years to form. If the game takes place in 2033, this means the laboratory fell in approximately 2023. With that said, let me bring up a quote from one of the scientists' tapes. This is one of the quotes from the tapes, as I said before. "Like this entire fucking thing was a goddamn waste. It feels like the past few years were more of the latter. We haven't had a breakthrough since the passive vaccine test we ran, 5 years ago?" Now, why is this line important? Two reasons. One, it's almost hidden. The line is from a tape that plays during a cutscene. This is the cutscene where Joel fast forwards the tape, so you only hear bits and pieces. This line is completely skipped in the cutscene. The only way to hear it is if you're willing to go back into your backpack and listen to it after the forced conflict that follows directly after said cutscene. It's almost like Naughty Dog didn't want most of us to catch it. Very interesting. The main reason why it's important is because this passive vaccine, likely is referring to the monkeys. The test on the monkeys happened right before the downfall of the university, not 5 whole years before. If we count back 5 years from the year 2023, when the tape was made, we get the year 2018-2019. They had a breakthrough with the vaccines around 2018-2019. What happened in 2018-2019? Ellie was born and conceived. Seems all too coincidental to be on purpose, doesn't it? So that, okay. So they're lining up this prospect that there was some sort of passive vaccine test that worked really well, and that was their last breakthrough from at least the scientists in the university level. And they are lining up the dates to make it seem like the passive vaccine test maybe was because of Ellie's inception, which I like it. That one definitely makes sense. And I like how this theory also, because I have done this before, I have tried to, match up different times, in the Last of Us world, dependent on at what rate the infected are turned. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have seen that a ton, and I've used that a lot. So I definitely like how they are, using that kind of parameter of time measurement to, measure a time when something could have happened based off of the infected that we see in that specific region of time. And so very interesting to see that there. That one I like. It's a little bit shaky because, I mean, the passive vaccine test could be anything, and maybe the dates are just, whatever, but it seems like it would make sense. You know what I'm saying? And my thought is, okay, like, how are they able to create a vaccine without killing Ellie the first time? And why is it that when we reach the end of The Last of Us 1, they, Marlene claims, that, well, not Marlene necessarily, but, it is said that they have to kill Ellie in order to extract the cure from her. But if the vaccine was because of Ellie, then they had to, then they made that vaccine without killing Ellie, which is quite interesting, and where I think it kind of falls apart, but maybe there's a explanation as to why that would make sense. It's something deeper that I haven't been exposed to yet. But now we have the second part of this theory, a few more pages to go, about 3 more pages, but we have part 2, the granddaughter theory. So let's go into this, okay? So we have 2 main points out of the way. To quickly summarize, it's been said that Anna was after a cure. Her child turns out immune, making the possibility for it being a coincidental unlikely. We also have evidence in the game that there was a that there was a breakthrough in vaccines for the cure right around the time Ellie was conceived and born. You finally got to the part 2 of how this all matters in The Last of Us Part 2. I suppose this is where the theory gets more into guessing territory, as I don't have any evidence from part 2 yet, but hear me out. I'll need evidence of some kind, so I'll look at quotes from interviews. So we have a quote here by, of course, the boy, Neil Druckmann. Shout out to him, obviously, for creating Last of Us, and being the main helm of the Last of Us universe. He has some quotes here that he says are quite interesting. So here we go. So he starts here by saying, quote, "This story is the counter of that. This story is about hate." So yeah, the part 2 is saying this is going to be a larger story. This is a complementary story to the first game, but the two together are gonna tell this much larger tale. So we have heard this before. We have heard the way Neil has expressed how he feels is the main theme of Last of Us Part 2 is that it is about hate. And it definitely is tied in and woven in to the fabric of the original Last of Us story. And so the document goes on and says, as you know, this story is going to be about hate and revenge. Do I think Ellie will go on a death trip because something happened to Dina? Not exactly. That just seems cheap, right? Do I think Dina will be involved somehow? Yes, I will explain why. Yeah, I definitely feel like Dina is going to be important in the game. However, I have heard that constantly about how, hey, maybe Dina gets killed or like Dina, something happens to Dina and Ellie goes on this like revenge quest in honor of her death. And that just, I never liked that theory. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wish they would utilize Dina in a more better way, as opposed to just being like this modder for a way to channel Ellie's rage and and just have a way to bring out Ellie's revenge type of factor to her. But I've never liked that theory in the first place, so I hope that won't happen in Last of Us Part 2. The doc goes on and says, as Neil and others have said in the past, Part 2 will, quote, combine with Part 1 to make one big coherent story. That begs the question, in order for Part 2 to complement Part 1, won't they need to plant answers in Part 2 that help us figure out mysteries that were in Part 1? Some of the biggest mysteries throughout the entire Last of Us are, quote, how did Ellie get immune? Who was Anna and how is she important? What did Marlene know? Can Ellie infect others? All these questions are tied to the main theory, and I feel like, we will get those. Like, I feel like the reason why those are questions we were asking at the end of Last of Us is, of course, to be answered in Part 2. I definitely feel like there is 100% chance that we will at least get some of these answers in Part 2, you know what I'm saying? And I definitely feel like it's definitely important to the overall story. So what is Ellie's revenge all about? I'm going to throw this at the wall and I hope it sticks. This is a granddaughter theory to the main theory. This theory is how I think it'll all come into play with Part 2. So here is the overall thesis of this kind of Part 2 to this, daughter theory. This is the granddaughter theory part. I like how he breaks it down here. So Ellie will soon find out all that her mother had to sacrifice in order to make her immune. She will realize how her immunity came to be and how she is more dangerous than she ever imagined. Now, That is an interesting line here because, of course, that calls back to, of course, the Naughty Dog trailer, which I think he's going to say right here, and I'm totally just jumping the gun. You know what? Let me just read his thing because he definitely is on the same track as me. Does, quote, "she is more dangerous than she ever imagined" ring a bell? It's a callback to the line from the gameplay trailer when Dina told Ellie they should be terrified of you. Knowing Naughty Dog, I strongly believe this line has more than one meaning, even more than two. Most people can gather that Dina might have been referring to herself with that line. Ellie said every man in this room is staring at you, hinting that men want to be with Dina, but Dina says people should be terrified of Ellie because Ellie is who Dina wants. The second and more obvious meaning of the line is that Ellie is much stronger now and more capable, as shown in the gameplay trailer, with her ability to battle her way throughout multiple people. I believe both of these are correct, but there is one more meaning to that line. The final meaning is one people probably will not like. The reason Ellie is far more dangerous now and people should be terrified of her is because she herself is contagious. Ellie has the ability to infect other people. I did not anticipate this theory going down this road, boys. I did not anticipate this. That is man. Okay, so this theory is unpacking the notion that perhaps Ellie can infect other people with the virus. I don't know if I love that, but let's keep going on this theory. At this point, you're probably thinking I have absolutely nothing to back this up, and I'm drifting from my original point. But I've got something based on evidence from the first game. If you look closely to a CDC pamphlet, it clearly states ways of spreading the virus. Quote, contact with bodily fluids of infected persons with CBL, usually by being bitten. I find it interesting that the pamphlet specifically says usually, as if there are exceptions. We all know the infection spreads with a bite. It spreads because the infected saliva enters the bloodstream of a non-infected person. We also know Ellie carries the infection. It just doesn't mutate in her. As stated in a surgeon's recording, quote, blood cultures taken from the patient, Ellie, rapidly grow cordyceps and fungal media in the lab. Also, I mentioned she came back, quote, infected when Fedra scans her in the beginning of part 1. The infection can also be spread when inhaled, so it's not exclusive to spreading only through the bloodstream. That is pretty, yeah. I mean, okay, my man here writing this theory. I see your point. I see what you're saying. All right, so I guess there is a chance that maybe, you know, long time exposure around Ellie, right, that could perhaps infect people that are around her a lot, but it would take a lot more time as opposed to Ellie just maybe, for example, biting. Like, we never saw Ellie bite anyone, right? So perhaps maybe, you know, and yes, like they said before, in the beginning of Last of Us, Ellie is scanned and she comes up as being infected because inherently she does have the disease, it just doesn't mutate within her. And so I guess technically speaking, she could maybe pass on to other people, but let's move on from the document. So that begs the question, if Ellie does indeed carry the fungus, since it is present in her system, doesn't that mean when a regular person came in contact with her bodily fluids, they'd be coming in contact with the fungus as well? That's I like this. I also must point out something that I think Naughty Dog has done on purpose. When Ellie and Riley kissed, Riley got bit very soon after, presumably turned. There is no way we could have known if Ellie's kiss could infect her. Ellie also bit David, but again, David died very soon after the bite, so there is no way we could have known if her bite infected him. And lastly, one I believe slipped by most of us is when Ellie almost drowned and Joel never did mouth-to-mouth, which is the main step of CPR. These are 3 instances where Naughty Dog deliberately avoided letting us find out if she's contagious until now. Okay. Before I segue into my next final point, Naughty Dog has mentioned that something so horrible will happen to Ellie, which will send her on the quest for revenge. Allow me to bring a quote from Haley Gross, writer working alongside Neil Druckmann. Gross hints that just as Ellie has built up a sense of stability and security, her world is, quote, upended by a large event which happens in Jackson that changes her and sends her on this journey of vengeance or justice. Whatever this event is, Gross says it's a moment in Ellie's life that will irreparably change her and devastate her soul. Okay, so I forgot that they even mentioned that. So, like, we have it confirmed that, all right, Ellie will be triggered to go out and do something in a revenge sense because of something that happens within the Jackson estate. So very interesting there. You may be wondering why I brought the quote up. What could go so horribly wrong that gosh, that word is so hard for me to say right now. That irreparably damages her soul. Maybe it's her biggest fear coming true. In the gameplay trailer, we see Dina both drink from Ellie's cup and share a kiss with Ellie. If what I predict is true, Ellie will come to find out how dangerous she really is. Ellie will infect Dina. Ooh, realizing she is indeed contagious. Ellie has said her biggest fear is that she ends up alone. If Ellie is indeed contagious, then, well, her biggest fear is coming true. It is what fuels her hate and anger. It is irreparable. Everyone will be terrified of Ellie. I'm liking this because it definitely did feel like a lot of cop-outs where, you know, they would have, you know, Ellie, you know, with the mouth-to-mouth thing, and Ellie, you know, bit somebody, because that's what you're thinking throughout the entire game. It's like, man, okay, like Ellie just bit, you know, homeboy over here. I forgot his name right now. David? Yeah, David. Yeah. So Ellie bites her. I mean him and everything, and we don't see him turn because he dies, obviously. And there's a bunch of other instances, and of course, with the Left Behind DLC, which I have not played yet. I'm waiting to hear the release date of Last of Us, and I would then play the DLC. But I know at the end of the game that Ellie shares a kiss with Riley and stuff like that, and so we never see Riley get necessarily turned by Ellie. We see her get turned by a bite that she succumbs to later on in the game. But this is all making sense. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe Ellie is contagious, maybe. But here is the final stretch that is much bigger than I expected theory. So this is kind of like the last little bit of the overall theory. So what is American Daughters? Who is on the cover? What will we be seeing Anna? I think American Daughters complements American Dreams nicely. In American Dreams, Ellie was living just that, a dream of being somewhat of a normal child, living behind walls, doing what everyone else does, surviving. This might be putting too much meaning into it, but this is Naughty Dog, so I'll take my shot. What if the phrase American Daughters is referring to Ellie? What if the possibility for a cure isn't gone? There's just a different way of obtaining it, through immune offspring. This would cause for a massive dilemma for Ellie. This would also mean Ellie's sexuality becomes a huge aspect in part 2 without it being forced. Her mother paved way for humanity to have a chance by making a strain of humans who can survive the sickness, leaving everything on Ellie's shoulders. But ultimately, Ellie's condition makes her completely alone, and her current sexuality makes reproduction a massive dilemma. Because, you know, obviously, you know, we are led to believe here that Ellie is either bisexual or gay, you know, a gay lesbian. And so, as far as I'm aware, you know, I believe she's just lesbian. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what Naughty Dog is trying to tell us. But maybe she could be bisexual. You know, I'm not here to make judgments or whatever. But also, there could be a big issue because if Ellie can indeed infect other people, right, with of course bodily fluids, that means that if Ellie were to have sex, the other person in that sexual encounter would of course be infected, unless Ellie got together with someone that maybe had a similar strand as her and perhaps was immune to the disease. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe if two, I mean, that's, I think what they're saying here is that, like, if Ellie pairs up with another person that is immune, then there you go, right? Like there's no way they can have the infection develop within themselves. But will we be seeing Anna? Is that the redheaded woman? Is that redheaded woman her on the cover? I can't say for certain, but I do believe she will have a major influence on the story one way or another. Whether that's her or not is up for you to decide. All I can say is she sacrificed everything for Ellie, and I can't wait to find out more about her. Whether this theory comes true or not isn't the point. These are merely thoughts I have while sifting through everything I know about my favorite game. I personally don't care for theories, so it's quite ironic that I just spent the last 7 hours writing and organizing all this. But with all the evidence under our noses, I couldn't help but write this up, especially since I have yet to see anyone else make these conclusions. It just all seems too coincidental to not make sense. It's up for you to decide what you believe. Thank you for dearly reading, endure, and survive, Rachel. So, of course, thank you, Rachel, for this. This is insane. I love this theory, and I feel like so. I guess this really should be a focus in future episodes. You know what I'm saying? Like what are the ties that we were left with in Last of Us that we need or want to see, double down on or look to second shot on in Last of Us Part 2. So overall, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about this Dara theory. Do you think Ellie can spread her infections to other people? Do you think Anna, did all of this for the betterment of, humanity? Did Anna even really love Ellie, or did she love the fact that she was a vessel for the cure to save humanity? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below, and all that good stuff. Well, that was an insane thing. And also, what do you think about Ellie's immunity? Like, what do you think about it? What are your thoughts on Ellie being immune to the virus? Let me know all your thoughts on the comments below. And make sure also, while you are down there, to check out our description where you can find our different Twitter links, our Discord link, as well as our anchor link down below to listen to this podcast. And, of course, our Cross Circle podcast on other podcast services, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, Spotify as well, all that good stuff. Make sure to go check out our long-form content down below in the anchor link. Thank you for watching, and as always, greatness awaits.